You are about to listen to another awesome episode of the If I Had One Wish podcast. It's such a pleasure to bring you these meaningful conversations from friends and allies across the Wish network. If you aren't part of the network already, do you know you can join? Either as an individual or a corporate member, you'll get access to all the wonderful things we offer here at Wish and play your part in championing women in our sector. Follow the link in the show notes to find out more, but for now, enjoy the conversation. Well, hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode of the If I Had One Wish podcast. I'm Crystal Hicks, your host for today, and we've got a fantastic guest joining us today, and we're going to be focusing on the theme of my presidential campaign called See Her. So today I'm honoured to be joined by someone whose leadership has transformed the way we think about homelessness and housing rights. Polly Neate, the former Chief Executive of Shelter. Welcome, Polly. It is such a pleasure to have you with me today.
Well, not at all. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for that somewhat hard to live up to introduction.
I've heard it from many a person, Polly, so it must be true. So we're going to dive straight in today, if that's all right. So a question that is really at the forefront of my mind, because as listeners know, I work in homelessness too, is the bigger picture. So when we think about homelessness, our minds go to rough sleeping, don't they? Even though homelessness is much broader and more complex than that issue alone. But we often think of it as a very male-centric thing, and we see it through that lens, especially rough sleeping. So just really keen to know what you think the challenges women face are when it comes to homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, actually, homelessness, like most actual social justice issues, is a gendered issue, and actually women are disproportionately affected. So it's not just that they're invisible, it's the fact that the focus on men means that a huge number of women are being poorly served within the system. And I guess for me, it's really important to start by saying that, because I'm very proud to be a feminist. When I joined Shelter, there was a campaign by men's rights activists to have me got rid of as the new chief exec, because they thought I would stop Shelter helping men, despite the fact that men are the majority of homeless. So, I mean, just to say, A, of course I believe in helping men, but B, men are not the majority of homeless. I think men probably are the majority of rough sleepers, in terms of people literally sleeping on the street, although that is actually hard to verify because women are much more invisible, even among the rough sleeping population. It's much more dangerous for women. It's dangerous for everyone, rough sleeping, but it's particularly very dangerous for women, which means they often, even if they have no roof over their heads, they might be on a bus, they might be in an all-night restaurant, they might be in places where they can't be found because they don't want to be found. They might be fleeing a domestic abuse perpetrator. And I think, how concerted a fixated perpetrator will be in finding his victim can't be underestimated. So there are all kinds of reasons why rough sleeping women are not visible. But I think there's another really important thing as well, because actually, the vast majority of homeless people are in temporary accommodation. And in that population, women and their children are massively overrepresented. So women are by far the most affected by that type of homelessness. There are lots of reasons for that, but I think the language that we use helps make them invisible. And this is one of the things I really wanted to change when I joined Shelter, actually. So we talk about families in temporary accommodation. Let's just say it as it is. These are single mums and their children in the main. And among those, women of colour are overrepresented as well. And it's really important that we talk about discrimination like that when it happens. Similarly, we talk about family breakdown as a cause of homelessness. There are lots of other forms of family breakdown. But if what we're talking about is domestic abuse, that vast majority affects women, then let's say that. So there's the language we use. So I think those are some of the main reasons why women's homelessness is relatively invisible. I know we're going to get on to appropriate services later, so I'll stop there for now.
Yeah. I think what you say there around sort of women of colour being the predominant group that are affected. I was at the housing conference in Manchester yesterday, and Daniel Hewitt, the journalist, stood up and said,
Yeah.
when I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember his exact words, but he said, when I, as a white man, stood up and started to talk about this issue, people started to listen. Yet there'd been black women who've been trying to get people's attention, trying to get their social landlords to listen, trying to get people to listen for such a long time. And nobody heard them. But yet one white man stood up. And yes, he's in an influential position. He's a recognized journalist. But still, it's just that invisibility of voice, isn't it? That just groups just aren't being seen.
Absolutely. And what he's illustrating there is the importance of men acknowledging that systemic discrimination within the system against women and speaking up about it, and not constantly kind of caveating that with, and of course men and this and man and like all this, like we have to just, if we could stop doing that, lads, it'd be great.
I'm really keen to do a series of the podcast, Polly, called Here Come the Boys. Because I'd just like to get the boys on to talk about where they think they could be good allies and where the issues lie. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your work at shelter? So you referenced there around the language and communication that you try to engender in the organisation around taking that gendered approach. So I suppose, are there any sort of specific initiatives or campaigns that you delivered at shelter during your time that really helped?
One of the things that I'm really proud of at shelter is a focus on discrimination as a whole. So yes, discrimination against women, absolutely, but other forms of discrimination too. And I think we, as an organisation, when I was there and still now, we're very bold in being very unafraid to centre that in our communications. And I think we really, I think we did lead the way on that. Also, though, I mean, there is fantastic work has been done by Homeless Link on women's experience of homelessness and on what services women need for a really long time. And so some of it was about understanding and respecting that work and the results of it, because actually it was great. I've already talked about kind of naming things for what they are. I think that's been really important. We also did, while I was there, we did a really great piece of peer research on services for women specifically, and what problems women were encountering, and how we could improve our services, as well as then we obviously publicised the research and talked about how services outside of shelter itself have to be improved. And that was a bit of peer research which was undertaken by women with direct lived experience of homelessness. And we also brought a lot of colleagues into the organisation who were women with lived experience. And I think they were much more, including at the ELT level. And I think they were at least as influential as me in shifting the way the organisation thought about gender discrimination in homelessness. We also ran a big campaign which was kind of a strategic litigation effort, which was about trying to prove that no DSS, as it's still called, is unlawful under the Equality Act. It's indirect discrimination under the Equality Act.
You wouldn't know it.
Well, no, including in some housing associations, by the way. Yeah, but it is unlawful. And we proved that by taking cases to court. And one of the ways in which we proved that it was unlawful was by indirect sex discrimination. So we did that, and we focused a lot on women and children in bed and breakfast. We specifically did, spoke out, did big communication campaigns around women in bed and breakfast, homeless in B&B accommodation and other temporary accommodation. So that's just some of the things that we did. But I wouldn't want to claim shelter on its own did this, but I think we were part of definitely a big effort on the part of charities, and I've mentioned Homeless Link particularly notably, in trying to shift that discourse. I've got to say, shifting public perception of what homelessness is really difficult. And people still think, so for example, people really honestly think that a huge proportion of homeless people are male veterans. I mean, not to say that male veterans aren't vulnerable, that they absolutely are, but actually a tiny proportion of even rough sleepers are veterans. So there's a lot of a kind of, and shifting perceptions, shifting public perceptions is one of the hardest things you can possibly do. In fact, I do think we shifted public perceptions around social housing, and that, I think, indirectly does really benefit women, because if we do see more social housing built, women are going to benefit from that because of the number of them that are homeless in TA, in temporary accommodation.
Definitely. Let's build on that a little, Polly, because we have a lot of guests on the podcast who work for social housing providers. I know a lot of our listeners are from the social housing sector.
Sure.
You know, brilliant that we're actually now talking about it again as social housing and not affordable housing, which is the dark route we went down for a few years.
The Orwellian path of weirdness, absolutely.
What was that all about? So, yeah, come on. You stepped down from your role at a shelter now, so you can be honest about this. How well do you think the sector's doing in recognising and responding to the needs of women?
I don't know, really. I mean, I guess I would say there's improvements. So one of the things that I think really has improved since I joined Shelter, it's nothing to do with me, by the way, this at all. I mean, just in the time that I was at Shelter, I've seen a huge shift in terms of women leaders in the sector.
Yeah.
The amount of organisations that are led by women, and a lot of those women are absolutely ace. I can really remember, this was so weird, especially having come from Women's Aid, which is all women. So the first external meeting that I went to at Shelter was a meeting convened by the sector, convened by National Housing Federation, actually, which was at that time led by a man, obviously. And it was about, let's convene the sector, key people in the sector, to talk about the sector's response to Grenfell.
Right.
And there were 12 people in that conversation, plus a facilitator. The facilitator was a woman, and there was only one other woman, me. And not only that, before the coffee break, twice somebody said what I'd just said, and everyone went, when I'd said it, they'd completely ignored it. And in fact, the facilitator even said to me, I'm so sorry that happened to you twice in the first sort of like hour and a half. Yeah. So that was my first experience of the housing sector. And I was just like, what have I landed in? This is, yeah. So I guess, so I don't think that would happen now. So I don't think if you convened, whoever the key people in the sector are to talk about this, I don't think there would be 11 women and one man. 11 men and one woman. What am I saying?
Yeah.
If only it'd be 11 women and one man. But I do think it would be a lot more equal.
Yeah.
So I do think there's been progress in the sector in terms of housing associations as employers.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, I still think that the systemic discrimination against women that exists isn't really being tackled. And that goes right from the fact that we're still not seeing enough specific services for women in homelessness, right through to understanding at every level of the system the specific issues that impact women's lives, and how those lead them to become homeless, how they lead them to behave, the other associated issues that those things bring with them, etc. And so I still think we've got quite a long way to go in understanding, never mind doing something about, the kind of systemic discrimination that women are facing. And I think actually, I'd almost go as far as to say, I think it's become a bit unfashionable or even taboo. If I think about years ago, if I think about Me Too and everyday sexism and No More Page 3 at the time, those initiatives by young women, mainly on social media, that did actually really, for a time, shift the discourse. I was one of the speakers at the first Women's March on London, which was when Trump was elected the first time, and there were 250,000 people there, and a lot of them were men, and a lot of them were people who don't go on marches all the time.
No.
So that sort of mobilization and cultural agenda, I think, has really been lost now. And that's a big problem. And I think it's provided then a cover for systemic discrimination against women to continue and even to get worse. And talking about, I notice the amount of eye rolling that you get when you start talking about patriarchy was kind of massive when I first joined Women's Aid. Over my time there, it got less and less eye rolling. People didn't really dare roll their eyes. Now it's kind of gone right up again. And it's, I get people saying to me, you can't talk about patriarchy because men feel blamed. Like, yeah, good. Yeah.
I think, it's, I think that thing around understanding the needs, experiences of women is something that shifts the dial. Like if there's that understanding there and you've got a willingness to do something about it, that's the point from which you can start to influence change. So like my campaign, that's exactly what I'm focusing on. So inspired by that wonderful book, Invisible Woman. I don't know if you've read it.
Indeed, yeah.
And gosh, it makes you angry, doesn't it, that book?
Well, I mean, it doesn't make me angry because my anger level's up there anyway.
Up there. Well,
if I got any more angry, I wouldn't be the laid back, lovely individual that I am.
So, but for me, it was just when I was thinking about, how can I really affect change here? What I realised is that men and women working in the social housing sector didn't necessarily understand the needs and experiences of their female colleagues and tenants. And the data that we hold on this is appalling. So, I was asking organisations like, can you tell me from your tenant satisfaction measure data, like, are women more or less satisfied with you as a social housing provider? And what I was getting back a lot was, the regulator doesn't ask us to present the data back to them in that way. So we haven't looked at it through that lens and said it to the regulator. Like, why are you asking them to send it back in this way? Yes, you're satisfied that they've got a fair selection pool of residents. They have to do that. It has to be representative. But it's only useful then if you then look at it through that lens.
Totally.
So that's what it's all trying to do. It's trying to, some of the stats really resonate with people. Around 75% of unpaid care work is done by women. So what might that mean for your HR policies? Or if you're over 65, you're more likely to die in your home from a triple fall in our social homes from a triple fall as a woman than you are a man. Like, so our homes aren't designed very well for women then, are they?
Yeah.
As they get older. So
absolutely.
I think once you start to look at it through the lens of the data that we do have, and gosh, there is so much data we don't have.
Yeah.
But if we start from what we do know and think, right, how do we build policies, services, our workforce around that insight? That's got to get, I
agree with you 100%. And it's interesting. So I had a really great experience quite a while ago, really soon after I joined Shelter. I led a commission on domestic abuse for Barking and Dagenham Council.
Oh, brilliant.
And at the time, and I brought together sort of national experts to be part of this commission. And it was a super interesting piece of work. One of the things that was going on at the time, still is in Barking and Dagenham, was a lot of development. And it was so interesting having conversations with the developers because it was so possible to make changes to the way developments were being thought out that would make them much safer for women, as you're saying. And this was with a focus on women's safety in terms of violence against women. But you're totally right in saying that's not the only dimension. It's also about the kind of distinct physicality of women and the risks that they experience as a result of that. So yes, so I totally agree with you. There's a real need to look at where's the starting point. Where are we starting from in our assumptions? And if you're actually starting from the position where when patriarchy is mentioned, you roll your eyes, you're not gonna be in a place where you're able to go back to first principles
Yeah.
and really make a difference in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there are some amazing men and women out there who are passionate about this
Yeah,
cause. It's not
indeed.
an us and them. My husband's married to me, and we have 2 daughters, and he has a mother, and he's just as passionate about this cause as I am.
So I think that's right. And I think male allies are fantastic and lovely and super important. And it's very weird to feel the need to say this. I've got a dad, I'm married to a man, I've got 2 brothers, I love men. Yeah, sort of. Although
Sometimes they're a bit
I,
annoying.
I also, well, I love some individual men as well, I go as far as to say. But I do think that active allyship is something that we actually don't get from men, even from the men that we love and the men that are close to us. And in those very male spaces, that for men to actually assert women's rights is very, very difficult. Actually, that's one of the reasons we have to have women on board and we have to have women on, and not only women on board, feminists on boards,
Yeah.
because we need to create an environment where systemic discrimination and misogynist attitudes are going to be called out, as well as men just being nice people, which of course many of them are.
Yeah. So, Polly, you've stepped down from your time at shelter. I'm
Yep.
sure you're still dead busy though.
I am busy, which is good because, I still have to make a living.
I suppose looking back at that time though, what would you say you were most proud of when it comes to improving the landscape for women?
Oh, God.
Oh, it's a horrible question.
No, I
Soz.
knew you were going to ask me this, and it's really hard to answer. But I mean, what I'm most proud of, actually, we had many, I think our services changed and we recognized that service provision is an act of activism.
Mhm.
Campaigning is not the only way to be an activist. Everything we do needs to be about tackling discrimination. And I think it was getting that understood is probably one of the things I'm really proud of. And we had lots of campaign successes. And I would argue that all of those improved things for women because women are disproportionately disadvantaged. So if you're improving private renting, which we have done, if you're raising awareness of the need for social housing, which we did do, if you're raising, with the work we did with Grenfell United on the Social Housing Regulation Act, again, that is going to disproportionately impact women. So I feel like what I'm most proud of is I did what I could.
Yeah, and your legacy is definitely living long and true in everything Shelter is achieving now.
Thank you.
So we're coming to the end of our chat, but we're not letting you off the hook without asking the question we ask all of our guests. And I'm going to caveat with saying you can't ask for more wishes. Okay, so you only got one
that's
wish.
boring. I wouldn't do that.
And it has to be focused on the sector, please. If you had one wish, what would it be and why?
I mean, if I had one wish about housing, it would be a huge increase in the delivery of social homes, by which I mean homes where the rents are pegged to local incomes, not wider affordable. That's my one wish for housing, and it would disproportionately benefit women. If I was going to think about women if I was thinking about a more specific way, something which which I've never really been able to work out what to do about, and I've seen this in every single job I've ever had. If I had a wish for women specifically, it would be for women and their children not to be unnecessarily separated because of homelessness, poverty, domestic abuse, and the way the system fails to tackle all of those things. So, in a way, on a personal level, that's the crusade that I haven't got to. And it's something that is not, it really eats away at me as an injustice that needs to be sorted. So in a way it would be that. That's only partly to do with housing. If it's got to be just about housing, then it would just be that social housing. Please, come on.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. I was looking at the
it's the only way.
Yeah. Some of the stats from the last edition of the housing review that comes out, and some really good graphs in there around the housing that we've delivered since 1945 and showing when social housing development just stopped.
It's so stark. Yeah, it's so stark. And it is solvable. Like, oh my God, if I had a couple of grand for every person, I say person, obviously mainly mean man, in housing, who's said to me, it's a lot more complicated than you think, Polly, I could build a bloody social home as myself. Like, literally, it's not. I want to say it's not as complicated as you think. Yeah.
Yeah. Polly, it's been lovely to chat with you today. You and I could chat for hours, right? We
could really
put the world to rights.
We should. Yeah.
But for our listeners' sake, we'll call it a day.
Yes. Shut me up, please.
Oh, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, Polly. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Yes, you've been listening to the If I Had One Wish podcast. Thank you everyone for listening to the If I Had One Wish podcast. Next time, we'll be talking to another inspirational female from the housing sector who will be sharing her career story on what she's learned along the way. And of course, we'll be asking again the big question. If she had one wish, what would it be and why? See you next time.